In the shadow of Phnom Penh's glittering skyline, lies a place few dare to name. Locals call it the Alley of Lost Light. Here beneath rusted tin roofs and torn mosquito nets, life clings to the edges of survival. At dusk, the air thickens, not just with humidity, but with the quiet negotiations of women who trade more than time. They trade dignity for dinner. Some have been here for decades, others just days. But all carry stories the city pretends not to hear. Behind every whispered price is a louder silence, the cost of being invisible. It's a story about choices when there are none. Number 1, life on the edge of the city. Just beyond the reach of Phnom Penh's polished boulevards and luxury high-rises, there exists another city, one stitched together by rusted tin plastic tarps and dreams that barely survive the night. These are the peri-urban settlements, makeshift neighborhoods that stretch like veins along the edges of Cambodia's capital. To outsiders, they may look like temporary camps, but for thousands of families they are home, or at least the closest thing to it. These communities are dense, claustrophobic. Even families of 6 or 7 squeeze into one-room shacks, barely the size of a small storage unit. The air hangs heavy with humidity, smoke from cooking fires, and the metallic scent of wet corrugated steel. Children play barefoot in alleys where sewage trickles past like a slow, grim river. Access to clean water is limited, and power outages are not the exception. They are the rule. Electricity, when available, is often stolen through tangled wires tapped illegally from government lines. In these settlements, there's no garbage collection, no paved roads, no official address. As far as the city's infrastructure is concerned, these places don't exist. They are phantom neighborhoods, visible only to those who live there and to those who choose to see. And who lives here? Mostly the unseen single mothers trying to stretch $1 into a week's worth of rice, migrant workers from rural provinces who arrived in the city with hope but were met with closed doors and impossible rent, and undocumented Vietnamese immigrants, stateless, invisible, and often unable to access even the most basic public services. In a 2024 report by the United Nations Human Settlements Program, it was estimated that over 70% of Cambodia's urban poor live in informal settlements. In Phnom Penh alone, more than 90,000 people inhabit areas not recognized by municipal authorities. These are not just slums, they are cities within a city, operating outside the system, surviving in the shadows. But perhaps the most vulnerable of all are the women. Women who, through circumstance and desperation, have become the silent pillars of these invisible neighborhoods. Many are widowed or abandoned. Others fled domestic violence in the countryside, only to face new battles in the city, this time with poverty stigma and survival itself. These women shoulder not only the weight of economic hardship, but also the expectations of care. They cook, clean, raise children, and somehow still search for work. But when jobs are scarce and bills keep coming, many are pushed toward choices. No one should have to make choices that blur the lines between necessity and sacrifice. Sometimes one woman told a local NGO worker, "You sell your body not because you want to, but because it's the only thing left to sell." This is not just about poverty. It's about abandonment by systems, by society, and sometimes even by hope itself. Yet, despite it all, there's resilience here. Laughter still echoes in narrow alleys. Children still chase each other through puddles. Women still gather in corners to share news, rice, and what little they can spare. But make no mistake, survival in these settlements is not a lifestyle. It's a daily negotiation, a balancing act on a wire made of hope, fear, and endurance. And as Phnom Penh continues to expand, building skyward, outward, and forward, these communities are left further behind. Not just geographically, but in the hearts and minds of those with the power to change things. Still, they persist, forgotten by the city, but unforgettable once you've truly seen them. Number 2. when survival isn't a choice. To understand why so many women in Phnom Penh's shadow communities turn to dangerous, unstable work, we have to rewind. Not just to yesterday, but to decades of deep-rooted inequality. Poverty doesn't appear overnight. It grows like a crack in concrete, slowly splintering futures. Let's start with the basics. According to the World Bank's 2025 Cambodia Urban Inequality Update, over 30% of urban residents in Phnom Penh live below the poverty line, or are at immediate risk of falling beneath it. The gap between the wealthy and the poor continues to widen. While luxury condominiums rise in the city center, thousands of families in informal settlements survive on less than $2 a day. That's barely enough for a single meal. But poverty alone doesn't tell the whole story. Education is a critical piece of the puzzle. In Cambodia, girls from poor families are 70% more likely to drop out before finishing secondary school compared to boys. Without education, opportunities narrow. Without skills, decent jobs are out of reach. And when you're a single mother, a migrant, or undocumented, the world closes in even faster. Many of these women are trapped in what experts call a structural poverty loop. It's not just that jobs are scarce, it's that the system wasn't designed with them in mind. Formal employment often requires identification documents, proof of residence, or education certificates. But if you were born in a rural village, fled domestic violence, or crossed the border without paperwork, those aren't just hard to get, they're nearly impossible. So what's left? Informal workday, labor selling fruit at the market, cleaning houses for strangers, sewing garments in home-based sweatshops, and, for some, exchanging intimacy for survival. A 2023 survey by LICADHO, a Cambodian human rights group, revealed that nearly 1 in 6 women working in informal street-based survival work in Phnom Penh cited feeding children as their primary motivation, not choice, just hunger. It's easy to judge from the outside, but when your baby has a fever and the rice jar is empty and the landlord is knocking, morality starts to look like a luxury. One woman who asked to remain anonymous told researchers, "I used to sell mangoes, but people want mangoes only, sometimes. Men. They want what I have every day." Her words linger not just as a statement of economic desperation, but of the brutal calculus many women face. What do you sell when you have nothing left? And it's not just about money, it's about safety or the lack of it. Informal workers, including those in informal and unregulated sectors, especially those in highly vulnerable roles, often fall outside the protection of labor laws. They have no contracts, no sick days, no health care. If they are assaulted, harassed, or underpaid, there's nowhere to turn. Justice becomes a word others can afford. Add to that the weight of stigma. Society sees the act, but not the hunger behind it. It sees the body, but not the broken system. It shames the symptom while ignoring the cause. Still, these women persist, not because they're reckless, but because they are resilient. They wake up each day and navigate a city that was not built for them, speaking softly in a world that only listens to power. And that brings us to the painful truth. Many women aren't choosing risky work, they're choosing to survive. Number 3, the high cost of being invisible. When survival becomes a daily gamble, the cost isn't just counted in money, it's written in bruises, in sleepless nights, in the silence of unspoken pain. For women living and working in the shadows of Phnom Penh's informal economy, every day brings risks far beyond what most of us can imagine. Let's talk first about the body. Without consistent access to healthcare, many women in these high-risk informal roles quietly endure ongoing health challenges. According to a 2024 report by Médecins Sans Frontières, working in Southeast Asia, more than half of the women surveyed in Cambodia's unregulated service sectors were facing untreated health issues related to reproductive care, often due to a lack of access, stigma, or fear. But health concerns are only part of the story. Personal safety remains a daily struggle. A joint study by UN Women and the Cambodian Women's Crisis Center found that nearly 4 in 10 women working in public informal environments had encountered some form of physical harm within the past year, sometimes from those they interacted with for work, and at times from figures of authority or bystanders. Why? Because when you don't exist on paper, justice is a locked door without a key. Without official employment, these women have no contracts, no worker protections, and no access to legal aid. Hospitals demand identification, police demand explanations, society demands silence. And then there's the toll on the mind. Imagine living with the constant fear of being arrested, assaulted, or evicted from your shack, all while raising children and hiding the truth of your work. Mental health services are scarce even in Cambodia's formal systems. In informal settlements, they're practically non-existent. Women in these communities report high levels of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts, but most cope alone with no counselor, no hotline, just whispers and prayers. It's not just about the now, it's about what comes next. Because this is not just a crisis of the individual, it's a crisis that echoes through generations. Children born into these circumstances inherit more than poverty, they inherit trauma. Many are pulled out of school early to help with income, or worse, to take care of siblings while their mother works nights. According to a 2025 UNICEF Cambodia estimate, 1 in 5 children living in informal urban settlements has never attended formal schooling. This is how the cycle begins, and once it starts, it's almost impossible to break. Without education, the next generation is just as vulnerable, just as likely to end up in the same risky jobs, facing the same lack of protection and the same crushing sense of invisibility. What makes it worse is the world's refusal to see. When the system fails to protect, when the laws don't apply, and when the public turns away in shame or disgust, these women are left to carry it all alone. But here's the truth. We don't say out loud, no one chooses to live like this. No little girl dreams of growing up to sell her body under a flickering street lamp. This is not about bad decisions. It's about the absence of options. And that absence comes with consequences that last far beyond the night. Number 4, a city that looks away. You'd think that in a city like Phnom Penh, so full of movement, construction cranes, and rising towers, there'd be no room for invisibility. But somehow, entire communities have vanished from the public conscience. Not because they don't exist, but because society has learned how to look away. Let's call it what it is: social avoidance. It's more comfortable to imagine poverty as something distant, something rural, something foreign. But the truth is, poverty lives just a few blocks away from polished office buildings and bustling night markets. Still, these settlements are rarely seen on news reports or tourism brochures. Most city residents pass them by without a glance, sometimes out of guilt, often out of fear, and always with the unspoken belief, it's not my problem. And that belief is exactly the problem. In 2025, a study by Urban Voices Southeast Asia found that nearly 65% of Phnom Penh residents admitted they had never visited or intentionally avoided informal settlements. Among those who had over half described the experience as uncomfortable or unsafe. This isn't just physical distance, it's emotional detachment, reinforced by layers of stigma. But it goes deeper than attitude. It's embedded in the architecture of the city itself. Urban planning in Phnom Penh, like in many rapidly growing cities, favors vertical development and high-income districts. According to the Cambodia Urban Equity Index, only 15% of new infrastructure projects between 2020 and 2024 were implemented in low-income or informal areas. That means fewer roads, fewer clinics, fewer schools, and more isolation. Meanwhile, zoning laws and development permits often favor private investors over public interest. Communities that have existed for decades without official land titles can be bulldozed with little warning or compensation. It's displacement disguised as progress. And then there's the law. The legal system, ideally a shield, often becomes a sword against the poor. Without documentation, residents of informal settlements have no legal recognition. They can't report crimes, access services, or even enroll their children in school without facing bureaucratic walls. In some cases, women who experience abuse or exploitation are afraid to go to the police, worried they'll be arrested for loitering or solicitation instead. This is what systemic injustice looks like. Not just cruelty, but indifference dressed in legal paperwork and official silence. But there's a way out, and it starts with shifting how we see. Because here's the truth: empathy is not weakness, and acknowledging suffering doesn't mean inviting blame. In fact, the most radical thing we can do is stop asking, why don't they try harder, and start asking, why have we made it so hard to begin with? We need to replace pity with proximity, replace stereotypes with stories, and most of all, replace shame with solidarity. Organizations like People in Need Cambodia and Equitable Cambodia are already doing the work, offering legal aid, supporting land rights, and creating platforms for marginalized voices. But they can't do it alone. Real change requires more than charity. It requires will. Will to listen, will to learn, will to act. Because the truth is, the distance between us and them is not measured in miles. It's measured in mindset. And if we keep walking past these neighborhoods like they don't exist, we become part of the system that ensures they never will. Number 5. Seeds of change in the shadows. Amid the weight of poverty, violence, and stigma, it's easy to feel like there's no way out. But even in the darkest corners of Phnom Penh's forgotten neighborhoods, small lights are beginning to flicker, lit, not by charity, but by determination, and by those who refuse to accept that invisibility is destiny. Let's begin with the people who are stepping up. Across the city, grassroots organizations and NGOs are quietly but powerfully reshaping what's possible. Groups like Samakum Taang Tanaut, Hagar Cambodia, and Damnok Toek are not just handing out supplies, they're handing people back their dignity. Through mobile health clinics, they provide free reproductive checkups and psychological support. In 2024 alone, Hagar Cambodia reached more than 12,000 women across Phnom Penh and Siem Reap with trauma-informed counseling, vocational training, and legal advocacy. For many women, this was the first time someone asked what happened, not just what they did. But health is only one piece of the puzzle. Survival becomes sustainable when it turns into skill. That's why vocational training programs have become a critical bridge between desperation and stability. At Voice Cambodia, a nonprofit specializing in economic reintegration, women are learning sewing, cooking, digital literacy, and even small-scale bookkeeping. The goal isn't just to give them jobs, it's to give them control over their own stories. Take the story of Dara, a 32-year-old single mother who once slept behind a market stall selling scavenged vegetables by day and herself by night. In 2023, she joined a 6-month tailoring program run by Women's Resource Center. By early 2024, she had opened a modest clothing repair shop near Bong Kok Lake. It's no palace, but it's hers. Her son now goes to school every day. He wants to be a teacher. And Dara, she no longer hides when someone knocks on her door. These aren't isolated cases. They're seeds, and they're growing. According to the Cambodian Ministry of Social Affairs, reintegration programs supported by international NGOs have helped lift nearly 18,000 women out of high-risk conditions between 2020 and 2024. And though the journey isn't always linear, relapses happen, housing remains unstable. What matters is that the path now exists. Still, none of this works without one vital ingredient: trust. These programs succeed not just because they offer services, but because they offer belief. They meet women where they are not where society thinks they should be. They don't shame the past. They build toward the future. And make no mistake, change doesn't happen at scale until it starts at the street level. That's why local mentors, many of them women who were once trapped in the same cycle, now serve as peer educators. They lead workshops, support survivors, and walk beside newcomers through the process of healing and reclaiming agency. There's a special kind of power when someone says, "I was where you are, and I made it." It's not a miracle. It's not a happy ending. It's hard, messy human work, but it's happening. So the next time someone says, "They'll never change," remember Dara. Remember the thousands of women rebuilding from rock bottom, needle by needle, step by step, day by day. Because hope isn't just an idea in these communities. It's a job, it's a skill, it's a shop with a handmade sign, it's a child in uniform walking to school with clean shoes and a full belly. And most of all, it's proof that dignity once restored has a ripple effect no statistic can fully capture. Number 6. One woman's journey from pain to purpose. Her name is Sray Mom. At least that's the name we'll use here to protect her identity and honor her journey. Because what matters most isn't the name itself, but the story it carries. To most people, she's just another woman walking through the crowded alleys of Boong Salang, a rundown district north of central Phnom Penh. But if you stop long enough to ask, you'll hear something more. Something remarkable. Because Sray Mom used to be invisible. 10 years ago, she lived under a tarp behind a construction site. She had no ID, no job, and no money. She was 24, a mother of 2, and doing whatever it took to survive, including selling her body for the price of a bowl of rice. At night, she would hide her children behind a sheet of plastic while she disappeared into the shadows. But what changed her life wasn't a miracle. It was a knock on the tarp. A volunteer from Hagar, Cambodia had been canvassing high-risk zones, offering basic health screenings and emergency referrals. At first, Sray Mom refused help. She was used to being judged, or worse, pitied. But the volunteer didn't flinch. She didn't preach. She just listened. And that simple act opened a door that had been locked for far too long. From there, the pieces began to shift. With support from Hagar's trauma recovery program, Sray Mom began attending counseling sessions. She enrolled in a 6-month culinary training course supported by Friends International. Her children were placed in a community learning center while she trained. Slowly, step by step, the chaos began to quiet. By 2023, Sray Mom had secured a job as a cook in a local eatery. By 2024, she was managing the kitchen. But the story doesn't end there, it evolves. In early 2025, Sray Mom returned not to the streets, but to the same community she once escaped. This time, not as a client, but as a mentor. She joined Voice Cambodia as a peer support worker, helping women just like her find pathways to safety skills and self-worth. Today she walks those same alleys not in fear but with purpose. And here's the part that truly matters, she didn't do it alone. Behind her, transformation was a quiet web of support, social workers, volunteers, childcare educators, even a retired nun who taught her how to write her name in Khmer for the first time. Her children, now aged 12 and 9, are back in school. The boy wants to study technology. The girl wants to be someone who helps other kids. It's proof of something we often forget: healing is a community act. According to a 2025 report by the Cambodian Ministry of Women's Affairs, over 21,000 women in vulnerable urban areas have received some form of social reintegration support in the past 5 years. But the most sustainable outcomes come when survivors are placed at the center of the process, not just as beneficiaries, but as builders of change. And Sray Mom. She's not just surviving anymore. She's leading teaching basic hygiene to girls, hosting weekly meetups in her neighborhood, telling her story, not for pity, but for power. She reminds us that even in the most broken spaces, transformation is possible. Not perfect, not instant, but real. And when asked what keeps her going, she says this: "If someone hadn't believed in me back then, I wouldn't be here now. So I believe in the next woman." This is what hope looks like. Not glossy, not loud, just a woman once shattered, now whole and reaching back with open hands. Because change doesn't start with policies, it starts with people. And sometimes all it takes is one woman who decides to rewrite her ending and help someone else begin. Behind every narrow alley and broken rooftop in Phnom Penh's forgotten neighborhoods, there are people, not statistics, mothers, daughters, survivors. And while the hardship is real, so is the hope. What we've seen in this documentary is not just poverty, but resilience. Not just struggle, but the quiet strength to rise, rebuild, and reach back for others. At NVL Travel Documentary, we believe travel is more than seeing places. It's about seeing people. If this story moved, you take a moment to reflect and act. Support organizations like Hagar Cambodia, Voice, or Friends International groups working tirelessly on the ground. Even a small donation, a volunteer hour, or sharing this video can help amplify the voices that matter most. And if you found value in this journey, feel free to like, comment, or subscribe. Not because you have to, but because these are stories worth being heard. Let's build a world where compassion travels just as far as curiosity. Together we can make sure no one is invisible.